The time is 3:59, and we're now back on the record.
Hello again. I just want to revisit some testimony from earlier today. You said that you had regular all-hands meetings with Steve Davis, who led them. Do you remember testifying about that?
Yes.
How often were those meetings?
Approximately weekly, but in certain cases less frequently than that.
How long do those meetings run?
Anywhere from 20 minutes to, in cases where Elon was there, 2 hours.
Did you ever talk at these meetings?
Yes.
Did you present to the group at these meetings?
Yes.
How many people were there typically?
It varied as Doge grew in size.
Okay. So at minimum, how much?
20.
Maximum?
80.
Average per meeting?
50.
Okay. What did you present to the group when you presented?
It varied based on the meeting.
Okay. Did you ever present on NEH at these meetings?
No.
Did you ever present on any of the other agencies that you were managing?
Yeah.
Okay. Which ones, for instance?
The United States Institute of Peace.
Why didn't you present on NEH?
Frankly, it wasn't worth presenting on. There were more substantive updates, and it wasn't a big enough agency where it would have been relevant to the rest of the Doge team, so I didn't share it.
Okay. So Mr. Fox didn't present either on the NEH?
No.
Okay. How often would Mr. Musk show up at these meetings?
Once every 3 meetings, typically, and it was a subset of the group that would meet with him.
Were you ever part of that subset?
Yes.
What about Mr. Fox?
No.
Did Mr. Musk ever ask about grant cancellations at these meetings?
No.
Why did meetings with him usually go longer than your typical meetings without him?
A variety of reasons. One, people had longer form updates to share with Elon. Elon is more philosophical in the way that he speaks, and so it's less bullet point update-esque with him, and it's more long and drawn out, and sometimes you go off topic, and so they just tended to be longer.
Would you say that you were kind of learning about how to implement Doge's strategy at these meetings?
No. You weren't there unless you weren't on the Doge team unless you already had an instinct of how to move quickly and push changes through. Okay. So there was nothing to be taught, really.
Okay. So I guess, I know there were a lot of meetings over a long period of time, but what was the typical substance that was discussed at these meetings?
Any potential, the meetings focused on the larger cabinet level agencies in the government. So Department of Defense, State, Commerce, Treasury, and the heads of those teams were frankly taking up most of the time because the dollars associated were more important. The small agencies, as the name implies, were smaller dollar valued. And so my updates were frequent but short. And so the substance was basically high-level changes, any potential blockers, basically bullet point level updates around changes.
Okay. You mentioned also that there was a meeting that you had at the White House. Do you remember that testimony from earlier?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me more about that meeting. Who was there?
That meeting was in May. It was Elon, Steve Davis, myself. I believe Howard Lutnick was there for a portion of it. Antonio Gracias was there. Jared Birchall, who's Elon's confidant, basically, and other members of the senior members of the Doge team.
Okay. How did you end up at this meeting?
I was one of the 10 leaders of a team at Doge, so anyone that was effectively viewed as a leader was invited, and so that was why I was there.
Okay. Who were the other leaders at Doge?
By that point, it changed over the course of time because people came and left and so forth.
Yeah, that makes sense. At the time of this meeting, who were the other 10 leaders?
The ones I listed plus Edward Korstein was there. He was working on the Treasury. He wasn't our lead for the Treasury, but he was working on work at the Treasury. Aram Moganasi, who worked at Social Security. Jamie Sullivan, who was at OPM, Office of Personnel Management. Jeremy Lewin, who was our lead at the State Department. Maybe a few others I'm missing.
Okay, that's fine. Could you describe what you believe the purpose of that meeting was?
I'm just going to object. This whole line of questioning has nothing to do with this case. This was a meeting that took place after the grant terminations at issue, and I do not see any connection to this case whatsoever.
Are you objecting on the basis of privilege?
I'm objecting on relevance, and I would like you to explain why this has anything to do with this case.
I'm sorry, counsel, I don't need to explain why I'm asking questions, and I think it's very inappropriate that you're kind of coaching the witness right now.
I'm not coaching the witness. I think it is inappropriate of you to try to take advantage of discovery in this case to ask about things with no connection whatsoever to this case.
I'd ask that you keep your objections to form or foundation.
I generally have, but this is getting
that are completely
this is getting very, very far afield from anything relating to this case at all.
Okay. We're talking about the Doge team.
You're talking about a meeting that happened
Excuse me, Ms. Dowd.
after.
Can I finish what I'm saying, please?
No,
Because
I will finish what I'm saying.
I'm trying to speak on the record, please. So let me finish what I'm saying, and then I'll let you talk as well. We're talking about the Doge team that deployed certain individuals to various agencies. One of them was NEH, and I'm trying to understand the strategy of Doge, the function of Doge, the org chart of Doge, which is all relevant to the case. As you know, and as the judge has said several times. So I'm going to continue with my questioning. If you have objections, again, I'd ask that you keep them to form or foundation and not give speaking objections.
That is not what you are asking about currently. There may be privileges implicated. I don't know, because this is not a topic we have discussed, given that it has nothing whatsoever to do with this case.
Okay. Thank you for raising your objection. Again, I'd ask.
I am allowed to speak, and you are not allowed to tell me I'm not allowed to speak.
You cannot raise speaking objections. We both know that is.
Well, you can't ask questions that are not questions, but you've done that many, many times today. So.
Okay. I just want to get it on the record that counsel is coaching the witness.
I'm speaking to you. I'm not saying anything to the witness or instructing him not to answer or anything like that.
Okay.
I'm putting on the record that this line of questioning is irrelevant, and I do not think that it is appropriate for you to use this deposition to ask about things with nothing to do with this case.
Things that you don't think have to do with the case, but
Well,
I'll digress. It's okay. I understand your point.
That you are unable to articulate as relating to this case, because you're not asking about the structure.
This is incredible. You continue to coach the witness. Please keep your objections to form or foundation.
I will say what I think is appropriate, and you will not tell me not to say things.
Okay, thank you. Let's get back to the questioning, if we can. Are you going to answer the questions here?
Can you repeat it?
Yeah, sure. Could you repeat the last question that I asked the witness, please?
Could you describe what you believe the purpose of that meeting was?
Yes.
There was no stated purpose in advance of the meeting. It was a general weekly catch-up with Elon. And so it was often unclear what the topic of those would have been.
Okay.
It varied.
Why was this one at the White House versus other meetings?
Because the White House is connected to the Eisenhower building, and the weekly meetings with Elon would either have taken place in the White House or in the Eisenhower building.
Okay. I want to go back really briefly to your understanding of what the American Revolution means in the context of the grant terminations that we've been discussing.
The American Revolution. Right?
That's
Okay.
right. No. So, if I understand correctly, one of your goals was to maintain grants that had to do with the American Revolution, is that right?
No, that wasn't explicitly stated.
Okay. So that wasn't one of the goals of...
Keeping grants related to the American Revolution was not one of our guiding criteria for keeping
the founding of the country?
If there were papers related to the founding fathers of the country, our judgment was to not terminate those.
Okay. Only the founding fathers, or the greater context of the American Revolution and the founding of the country? Which one?
I think they both would have fell in that general category, but it wasn't explicitly the American Revolution.
Okay. But it was explicitly the founding fathers?
It wasn't explicitly the founding fathers. It was a judgment call of figures around that time period of the country that we thought were apolitical and worth keeping.
Okay. When you say they were apolitical, what does that mean?
That they weren't related to DEI, and both a reasonable person would look at those and say that they're not political.
How would you determine what a reasonable person would think?
We're using our judgment.
Okay. So, if there was a grant that came from that time period that touched on the American Revolution or the founding fathers, but referenced the word black or gay or LGBTQ plus or something, how would you determine whether that would be saved or not?
I don't know. That's a theoretical question, and that wasn't one of the grants that was included, so I don't know.
There were no grants that you canceled from that time period?
Do you have the list of grants?
Related.
We can look at the grants. I don't know.
Okay.
There were 1,500 of them.
I guess I'm asking, I guess it's kind of...
If you have a question about a specific grant, I'm happy to ask how we would have treated it.
Right, so if I give you an example of a grant, can you tell me how you would perceive whether that grant
Sure.
is DEI?
Is it an actual grant from NEH?
Well, I'm about to let you know. So, if there was a grant, let's say, about, let's say, a black person during the founding of the country, and it said black or people of color in the description, would that grant be flagged for review based on the usage of the term black or person of color?
No, I wouldn't have.
Okay. How were you otherwise finding grants that were DEI? Was it not through certain terms, certain words?
You would search DEI, DEIA,
Okay.
equity, inclusion, BIPOC, LGBTQ, LGBTQ plus, etc.
Okay. So there was a grant that was canceled that was, the description was 40 Acres and the American Revolution, Stories of Independence and Servitude, planning of exhibits and public programs exploring the lives of the enslaved and prisoners of war at the 40 Acres farmstead in Hadley, Massachusetts during the American Revolutionary period. Is there something in that description that would flag DEI for you?
Objection.
Can you read it again?
Sure. 40 Acres and the American Revolution, Stories of Independence and Servitude, planning of exhibits and public programs exploring the lives of the enslaved and prisoners of war at the 40 Acres farmstead in Hadley, Massachusetts during the American Revolutionary period.
No, there's nothing in there that would strike me as DEI.
So why do you think this was flagged as DEI?
Objection.
Wait, as EA or DEI? What was your last thing you said?
What? As DEI.
Okay, sorry.
What was your question?
Why was this grant canceled, but other grants that related to the founding of the country not canceled?
I think we discussed this. Maybe we didn't. The only criteria that we used was not just DEI. It was DEI plus our judgment about wasteful spend.
Right.
We had a broad mandate to reduce the amount of grants that were outlaid at NEH, and that was not one of the priorities that the administration cited as important. So it was cut, not on the basis of DEI, on the basis of being unnecessary and wasteful.
But you were promoting the founding of the country, right?
Objection.
We were promoting the founding of the country. No, that's not what we were doing.
Okay, I guess it appears to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, but one of the goals of your work was to preserve grants that were about, as you said, the Founding Fathers, the American Revolution.
I didn't say the American Revolution. You said the American Revolution.
So let's actually figure out exactly what you meant by this. What exactly, in this context of the American Revolution, the Founding Fathers, what exactly were you trying to preserve and the Doge team trying to preserve?
Objection.
First of all, Mike McDonald and Adam had a view of what should be kept and what should be cut. Their view initially was that papers relating to George Washington, John Adams, etc., were important enough to keep. That's not to say that every grant related to the founding of the country and every grant relating to the American Revolution fell into that bucket. Those are ones that they specifically flagged as important enough to keep. In addition to that, there was an entire bucket around the America 250 initiative, the Garden of Heroes Museum, that were in addition to the ones I just mentioned. There were probably 30 or so that I think your colleague flagged before. So that's not to say we were to keep every single grant related to the founding of the country. There were just some that they advised that they wanted to keep. So.
Okay. So it sounds like there was some type of priority reserved for grants that had to do with the founding, as opposed to grants that did not have anything to do with the founding of the country.
That's, I think, generally right.
Okay, great. And the grant that I just read had something to do with the founding of the country, and it was terminated, in your view. Why?
You'll have to ask Justin. I actually don't know.
Okay. There was a grant about a German theologian that was kept.
Okay.
Had very little to do with the founding of the country. Why do you imagine a grant like that would be kept?
Can you
Objection.
Can you read the description of the grant, please?
I don't have the description in front of me, but.
Well, I can't comment on it unless I have the full context.
Okay, but is there a reason that a German theologian would be, a grant about a German theologian would be kept?
I need more context on the grant, to be honest, but on the surface, I've said, my gut says we should have cut that one too.
Okay. All right, I have the description in front of me. I'll read it for you really quickly, and then we can
Great.
move on. So, the description is preparation for print publication of an English translation of volumes 4, 5, and 6 of the lectures and shorter works of the German theologian Karl Barth from 1886 to 1968.
Yeah, we definitely should have cut that one. I don't know why it was missed. You'll have to ask Justin.
Can I ask what is this document?
I'm reading the description of the grant.
In what document?
It's in all of the documents that have the grant description.
Can you just give me a Bates number of a document?
It would be in the documents. I'm not reading it from a document that we've exhibited. I don't think I need to. And the grants that we've seen and the documents that we've seen have the grants that are being referenced.
Well, but some of those are, not the final list. So I'm just trying to understand, because you keep making representations about what grants were and were not terminated, and we don't have any way of knowing
That's okay.
whether you're working from the right list, because you're not telling us what you're reading from.
And that's all right. And again, I would imagine that this is a speaking objection. So
It's not an objection. I'm asking you.
I just don't have.
Okay.
Okay, I don't have.
I guess we don't know what you're reading from. Okay.
Right, okay. Yeah.
You don't know what you're reading from.
Well, I do know that I'm reading.
And you won't tell us. Okay.
I know that we have documents that have the grant descriptions in them that we've already displayed, and it's from these documents that these grants
I'll tell you,
Front.
if there's a final list of grants, and that's the final list of grants and it was kept, my reaction is that it should have also been cut, and you should ask Justin as to why it was kept. It might have been an oversight.
Do you think that it's an issue that there might have been oversights in your work at the NEH?
I'd like to see the final list of grants that have been kept versus cut to confirm that what you're reading from is actually on the final list. Do I think it's acceptable there are oversights? No, I don't.
All right, I think that's all I have.
I have a few questions. Mr. Cavanaugh, you were asked some questions earlier about occasions that we have met or spoken, right?
Yes.
And you noted that we met yesterday in person, right?
Yes.
Leading question.
Can you at least not cut me off?
Okay.
We had spoken before on the phone a few times before that.
Objection, leading.
That's right. Yes.
When we met, did I tell you that it's important to tell the truth?
Yes.
Objection, leading.
Other than telling the truth and being aware of privilege, did I suggest what you should say or shouldn't say?
Objection, leading.
You testified earlier that agency heads had to sign off on grant terminations, right?
Yes.
Did you believe that you had the authority to terminate grants if the agency did not sign off?
Objection, leading.
No.
In the case of NEH, did Michael McDonald in fact sign off on the grant terminations?
Yes.
Objection, leading.
You testified earlier about Steve Davis. You remember
Yes.
that? And you testified that he had suggested that you go to NEH to meet with Michael McDonald.
Yes.
Objection. Objection, leading.
After that point, what, if any, involvement did Steve Davis have with respect to NEH?
Objection,
None.
leading, Lax Foundation, forum.
You can just say objection to forum.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's not leading if it says what, if any, involvement. How is that leading?
I appreciate that. Thank you, Councilman.
No, he had no involvement.
Did you ever discuss with him which specific grants to terminate at NEH?
No.
Objection, leading.
Did you ever discuss with him the criteria to use in deciding which grants
No.
to terminate?
Objection.
We looked earlier at some scorecards that you would send him on a weekly basis. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And what kind of information was in those scorecards?
The total value of the contracts that were terminated, grants that were terminated, and personnel that were at the agency at the start of the administration, January 20th, and then how many employees remained as of the latest scorecard.
Other than those updates, did you provide him other updates that related to NEH?
No.
Did you ever have any substantive discussions with him about NEH via Signal?
No.
And you testified a bit earlier about Jason Amonetti. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Who is Jason Amonetti?
Justin Amonetti.
Sorry, Justin Amonetti.
Justin Amonetti was an attorney at the U.S. Doge service and provided us with legal counsel throughout all of our work with the small agencies to the extent that he was on our team.
Without going into detail about the substance of any particular communications, what kinds of communications did you have with Mr. Amonetti?
Primarily around whether an action we were about to take with the agency head was appropriate, either by statute or form or otherwise. Anything that Justin and I felt like we weren't equipped to perform on our own and wanted to basically a lawyer's opinion on our actions.
Did you consult with anyone other than Justin Fox, Michael McDonald, and others from NEH in determining which grants to recommend for termination at NEH?
No, it would have been myself, Justin Fox, Mike McDonald, and Adam.
And you mentioned that there were two criteria that you looked at in flagging grants for termination. Is that right?
Yes.
And what were those?
The first bucket was any grants that violated an outstanding executive order, including those related to DEI. And the other bucket was our initial judgment of wasteful spending in the context of trying to reduce the federal deficit, which were presented to them for basically review and ultimately agreement.
Did you ever hide the reasons that you were selecting particular grants for termination?
Objection to form.
No.
Same objection.
No further questions. I just want to note on the record that there were some documents that were looked at that were subject to the protective order, and the questions relating to those documents are also subject to the protective order.
Understood.
Before we do off the record, I just need to ask for video purposes, if anybody would like to be ordering a video at this time. If you don't know at this time, if you'd like to determine a later date, you can always reach out to Lexitas at a later date, but I just try to make everybody's lives a little bit easier if you want to just order it now. So I'll start on the side of the table if anybody wants to order a video.
I think we're good for now, but
I appreciate that. We'll need to check with our team and get back to you.
Sure. Certainly.
Yeah, we'll put our order in later also.
Thank you so much. Do things on the record.
Would you like to order a copy of the transcript?
I'm gonna follow up about that.
Somebody has a standing order, I know.
yeah, we'd like a rough transcript, expedited, and then everything else in the standing order.
The rough transcript expedited or this expedited?
Okay. The time is 4:26. We're not going off the record. This concludes today's deposition.